If you're watching this video, odds are you have played a Pokemon game before, but odds are that you haven't noticed every interesting thing that there is in those games either. So in this video, I'm going to be covering 25 crazy things in Pokemon games that you didn't notice. To start things off, I think there's a pretty good chance that you didn't notice that there are actually two separate berries in Pokemon with the same name. The Chillin Berry was first introduced in Generation 3 as an e-reader exclusive that was also exclusive to Pokemon Ruby and Sapphire, so I'm sure there are some of you out there that didn't even know this existed, period. Now, you might have heard of the Chillin Berry before, and maybe even of the e-reader berry specifically, but you might not have noticed that in Generation 4, it was a completely different, unrelated berry, also named the Chillin Berry, that was introduced as well. So you may have known about the Chillin Berry, but not even noticed that there are actually two completely different berries with this name. While playing the OG Generation 1 games, you also might not have noticed that the TV in your house actually has special dialogue if you try to interact with it from the side. If you do so, it'll say, "Oops, wrong side." Also in the Generation 1 games, it is actually possible to miss a Pokemon when throwing a Pokeball, and not just in the Safari Zone either, but in regular normal gameplay. This can occur when the catch rate of the Pokemon that you're trying to catch is especially low, and will bring up special text that says, "You missed the Pokemon." Something that is actually somewhat notable but was completely buried and therefore not easily noticed is that in Gen 7, Qwilfish actually got a base stat boost, as its defense was boosted from 75 to 85. This is despite the fact, however, that Qwilfish is completely unobtainable in this generation outside of transferring one in from a previous game, so you almost certainly would not have realized this while playing. One thing you should definitely notice though is today's sponsor, Mundly. Mundly is a language learning app with over 125 million users and is one of the top 5 language learning apps worldwide. They're also offering a whopping 96% off for lifetime access, which I'm pretty sure is the best sale that I think I've ever seen anyone do. Mundly is great for learning languages because it offers learning in 41 different languages and from 33 different native languages, meaning that you can learn English, French, Finnish, and more while speaking Romanian, or you can learn Romanian while speaking English or French. It also provides lessons and materials from native speakers, weekly and monthly quizzes to review and test your progress, and it even offers a hands-free approach so you can learn a new language while cooking, working out, or whatever else you do, making it possible to learn a new language without having to reserve a bunch of time in your schedule for it. And the best part is, you can currently get lifetime access to all of this for 96% off using the link in the description or by scanning the QR code on screen. 96% off is pretty wild, so be sure to give that a look, and a big thank you to Mundly for supporting the channel. Another thing you could easily miss while playing is that over the years, there have actually been 3 different designs for the Ultra Ball. They're all very subtle changes, which would make it easy to not notice, but the first design can be seen in the TCG card Rocket's Sneak Attack, and in Pokemon Pinball. The second design can be seen in Ruby and Sapphire, and the third design is the one that we currently see in the games. What's funny about this though is that it originally appeared in Pokemon Stadium 2, but then obviously was changed to that aforementioned second design in Ruby and Sapphire, but then was also subsequently changed back for the games that followed it, given that it's the current design. So they apparently couldn't make up their minds with how they wanted the Ultra Ball to look back in the day. One thing about a Pokemon that you could have easily missed is that Arcanine actually has a black belly. This is seldom ever visible in the games, but it's more prominently shown off in Pokemon Sleep, which is pretty adorable. Another detail about a Pokemon that you probably never noticed is Aron's mouth. It sounds weird to say, but when you think about it, its mouth is never really seen. It's only in special situations when you can get under Aeron's model that you can see that it does have a mouth, and that it is smiling, which is ridiculously cute. Another couple of things from Gen 1 that you probably didn't notice is due to them being contrary to everything that the games teach you. Obviously, it is well known that ghost types are immune to normal types, but despite this, Super Fang can actually hit ghost types in Generation 1. So if you listened to what the games said and therefore didn't try normal type moves on ghost types like any regular person, you would have probably missed this really neat little tidbit. A similar thing also happens with the move Bind, as even though it can't damage ghost types, it can still prevent them from attacking, even though, again, it's a normal type move and should have no effect whatsoever, which is the case in later generations. Jumping ahead to Gen 3, there is a man at the Moss Deep Space Center that will tell you how many successful rocket launches there have been. While this guy is tied to the infamous Deoxys and Jirachi rumors of the day, and therefore has seen some decent attention, what you might not have known is that the number of successful launches that he says there have been is actually equivalent to the number of weeks it has been since you started playing your current save file. Also in the Gen 3 games, if you happened to make a trade with Pokemon Colosseum or XD on the GameCube, a Cherry Berry will be planted next to the Berry Master's house on Route 123. However, this isn't exactly a gift or anything, as the berry will actually never grow and will essentially just take up a spot of soil and prevent you from growing berries there. But this is something that happens so subtly that even if you do in fact trade with Colosseum or XD, you might not ever notice that it even happened. And speaking of XD, you probably didn't notice this next one because it's actually unused data in the game, but it's pretty cool, so I thought I would mention it. There's actually data in the game for some unused starter Pokemon, as even though you begin with an Eevee in the final games, there's data present for a level 26 Jolteon that you could have started with, as well as a level 30 Vaporeon. Their Met location is even listed as obtained from the player's dad, which is consistent with the Eevee that you do start with in the final games, showing that some different options were considered for XD's starter Pokemon. And since we're looking at unused data, we might as well go ahead and look at some other unused stuff too. I know that this is kind of a cop-out as far as not noticing it in the games goes, but it does technically qualify and it's pretty interesting regardless, so I figured it'd be cool to bring it up. In Ruby, Sapphire, and Emerald, there are some unused sprites within the game's data that feature the player performing a bunny hop on the front wheel of their bike, which you cannot do in the games, but it would be amazing if you could, so it's a shame that this wasn't included. Along these same lines, there are also sprites in Fire Red and Leaf Green that have the player surfing on a Lapras-like figure instead of the generic surf blob that is seen in the final games, which also would have been cool to include since it would have fit perfectly in the Kanto remakes. Next, let's wrap back around to some cool Gen 2 stuff with a fun fact about Unown. This one isn't literally in the games themselves, but Unown's original Gen 2 artwork features the G Unown, while the modern day artwork features the F Unown, which is likely meant to be a nod to Game Freak, who obviously make the Pokemon games, which is pretty cool. Also in Gen 2, the move Transform worked slightly differently than it does now. In both the Gen 1 and the Gen 2 games, when a Pokemon used Transform, it would retain its original color palette instead of transforming into a perfect copy of the opposing Pokemon. This means that it's actually possible to see pretty much any Pokemon with a bunch of different color palettes that they wouldn't normally have. This is normally only visible under pretty limited circumstances in-game, via using Transform with moves like Mimic or Metronome, So you can't exactly go completely crazy with it during normal gameplay, but if you were to take advantage of this mechanic and give Transform to a Pokemon that otherwise couldn't normally use it, you could see basically any Pokemon in those games in just about any color you wanted, and the results actually look really cool. You're also pretty unlikely to have run away from the Sudowoodo that you can encounter in the games as well, given that when you encounter it, that is the only time that you will have the chance to catch it in the games. However, if you do end up running away from it, you'll actually be greeted with a custom animation of it hopping out of sight, which is pretty funny. One thing that doesn't really get paid much attention to are Pokemon categories, so you might have not realized that Scizzor's category actually changed between generations 2 and 3. It was originally known as the Scissors Pokemon, but that was changed to the Pinsir Pokemon instead. Another Pokemon category change you might not have noticed is that also in Gen 3, Rattata and Raticate changed from the Rat Pokemon to the Mouse Pokemon, which is pretty weird considering that they're based on rats and have the word rat in their names, even in Japanese. So I don't really know why Game Freak felt the need to change these ones. And speaking of Gen 1 Pokemon, in Generation 1, Caterpie and Weedle can only ever know 2 moves, and they don't actually learn any moves at all in the games, as the only 2 moves that they can know are already given to them by default, and therefore they don't learn any moves by level up or TM or anything like that at all. When you think about it, this is technically even worse than Magikarp, who at least gets the chance to learn 1 move by level up, and it's also easy to not realize either due to how fast these guys evolve. Another funny thing that you can see in the Gen 1 games has to do with this guy outside of Oak's lab in Pallet Town. If you stand next to him and sort of herd him in the direction of the lab, he can actually walk on top of the door to the lab, since it is obviously able to be walked through by the player to get into the lab, but as an NPC, this guy can't do that, so he ends up just standing on the door instead. Jumping ahead to Gen 3 now, in Pokemon Emerald, if you try to use the move Hidden Power, but your Pokemon refuses due to disobedience and instead uses a different move, that move will actually change types to the type that Hidden Power is for that Pokemon, instead of being its regular type. The Gen 3 Pokemon Wurmple has also had an error in its design on multiple occasions, as in a trailer for Pokemon Legends Arceus, it can be seen with a yellow horn on the back of its head, which it's not supposed to have. And this design also shows up in Pokemon Pinball, Ruby and Sapphire as well. I don't know if this next one has been resolved or updated or not, but in the early days of Pokemon Go, there was some placeholder text for eggs that could potentially appear on your game that had a really weird message. It said, "Hatch this egg by feeding it butter. It likes all kinds of butter. Every kind. The best kind." It kinda seems like someone over at Niantic might have a weird relationship with butter. Something that is actually meant to be in the games though, that you can really easily miss if you don't use these Pokemon, is that Esper and Meowstic have circles hidden under their ears. I feel like this is especially hidden on Esper in particular, so it's pretty interesting to see. So, did you miss any of these things yourself while playing Pokemon? Be sure to let me know in the comments and leave a like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video. I will be back with another new video soon, and until then, as always, thank you guys so much for watching this one. I really appreciate it, and I will smell you guys later.